I'm looking at my shiny forehead. I forgot. Oh God.
Stop.
I
No, no, no,
really don't.
no.
I really don't care. I'm playing with you. Grateful just to be on the earth plane. Trust me. Get my.
Listen, I, yes, I agree. I completely agree. Welcome, 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 folks. Thank y'all so much for joining us. We're so excited that y'all are here to celebrate 50 years of the Combahee River Collective. So we're going to wait for more folks to pop on, but please feel free to share your name, your pronouns, and where you are based in the chat. We always love that. Thank y'all so much for joining. Hi, everyone. Okay, we have Sheila. Oh, Miss Sheila from Albany, New York. Wow. Oh, it's so hi, Sherelle from Philly.
Oh,
Folks from Los Angeles, Louisiana. Oh my gosh, they're
wow.
coming so fast.
Wow. Chapel Hill. Oh, my
Rio
goodness.
de Janeiro is here, Chicago, Boston.
Houston.
You see?
I
New
just saw,
Zealand,
yes.
Trinidad, Raleigh, North Carolina. Oh, South Africa is here. Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
Thank
Wonderful.
y'all so much for being here. We're
And
gonna wait a few more moments because we want to make sure folks get in. Oh, we have folks from a lot of Chicago folks, Demita. Oh my gosh.
we love to travel in packs. You know that. Come on. Ah, shout out to my friend Reka. I saw your name, Reka, Houston, Texas.
And there's a lot of Philly folks I see. This is really great. Really great. The
Yes.
Bronx by way of Senegal. Okay, perfect. All right, people.
Okay.
Thank y'all so much for joining. We are going to get started. I'm super excited for everyone to be here. So hello all, and welcome to 50 years of Combahee, celebrating 50 years since the founding of the Combahee River Collective. My name is Jamie Swift, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the founder and executive director of Black Men Radicals. Black Men Radicals is a Black feminist advocacy organization dedicated to uplifting and centering Black feminist activism around the world. Once again, thank you for joining us as we celebrate Combahee. At the vanguard of radical leftist Black feminist thought and behavior, the Combahee River Collective has and continues to make an indelible mark on Black feminist movements and beyond. The Combahee River Collective and the collective statement has personally and politically revolutionized my life, and I am and will always be indebted to their labor, lessons, love, and leadership. We are honored to have two founding members of the Combahee River Collective as our special guests, activists, organizers, scholars, and educators, Demita Frazier and Barbara Smith. We will also be joined by Anastácia Flora Oliveira, the inaugural Dandara dos Palmares Black Feminist Internationalist Fellow for Black Women Radicals, who will offer remarks on the impact of Combahee as a Black lesbian feminist from the Recôncavo region of Bahia, Brazil. Before I properly introduce our guests, please note that no disrespectful behavior will be allowed. Please respect our space and our esteemed guests. Now I will properly introduce our guests, who I have the honor and privilege to know and learn from, the Demita Frazier and Barbara Smith. Give it up, give it up, get up, get up. Okay. So Demita Frazier, JD, is an unrepentant, lifelong Black feminist, social justice activist, thought leader, writer, and teacher. She is a founding member of the Combahee River Collective, who has remained a committed activist in Boston for over 44 years and was a radical even as a child. While a high school student in Chicago, woo woo, she helped organize a student walkout in protest of the Vietnam War. She has worked in coalition with many organizations on the issues of reproductive rights, domestic violence, the care and protection of endangered children, urban sustainability issues affecting food access in poor and working class communities, and a host of other important issues affecting communities of color. She has been an organizer and architect behind the scenes of many movement initiatives, including the Chicago Black Panther Party's breakfast program, Jane Collective, and more. After receiving her JD from Northeastern University, Frazier contributed to local and national campaigns for gender and racial justice. For more on Demita's extraordinary activist journey, please see Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor's How We Get Free, Black Feminism in the Combahee River Collective. She has been a consistent advocate for the unequivocal freedom of Black women so that we can get on with the urgent business of freeing the world. So let's give it up for Demita Frazier.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next up, we have the Barbara Smith, who is an author, activist, and independent scholar who has played a groundbreaking role in opening up a national culture and political dialogue about the intersections of race, class, sexuality, and gender. She was among the first to define an African-American women's literary tradition and to build Black women's studies and Black feminism in the US. Her career is documented in Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around, 40 Years of Movement Building with Barbara Smith. Born in Cleveland, Ohio, she and her twin sister, Beverly, began participating in civil rights protests in the 1960s. In 1974, Smith co-founded the Combahee River Collective in Boston, Massachusetts, and in 1977, she co-authored the Combahee River Collective statement with Beverly and Demita Frazier. Smith taught her first class on Black women's literature in 1973 at Emerson College and has taught at numerous colleges and universities. She co-founded Kitchen Table Women of Color Press, the first U.S. publisher of books for women of color, in 1980. One of the books edited by Smith, Homegirls, a Black feminist anthology, 1983, broke new literary ground for Black feminism. In 2005, Smith was elected to the Common Council in Albany, New York. She was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize that same year. So let's give it up for Barbara Smith.
Yes.
So I could go on about y'all's bios. Y'all have done so much. I want to be like that, okay? I want to be like that one day. All right, so let's hop into these questions. I just want to know, first and foremost, how does it feel to hear we are celebrating 50 years since the founding of the Combahee River Collective? And what goes through your mind when you hear this?
I'm going to pipe up because I was 22 when we founded Combahee. I'll be 72 in July, and I cannot, it's everything that they tell you about time passing so incredibly quickly, and yet it doesn't really feel like that. The most important thing about having been a part of the creation of a new Black feminist ethos was that it was intentional. We were really driven. There's a question on here later that asked, what influenced us? We influenced one another in a lot of ways because we didn't have a roadmap. We were really trying to pull together from the multiple threads of our individual activism in a number of settings, but we needed to distill something that was Black and feminist because trying to organize in the bodies we were in with the politics that we had at a time when gender-based politics was really difficult, and in the Black community particularly, but we were determined. And I love the fact that that's another piece of who we were, the determination and the unwillingness to relent. We just, no matter who tried to come to us and tell us, what's this Black feminism thing you're doing? We had an answer and a perspective that made sense when people thought about it. So I feel like 50 years is, in human terms, a long time. Relative to the rest of the earth and all the other things that really mark time, a very short time. We still have so much work to do just in terms of refining and understanding what we mean, what we're saying when we talk about Black feminist politics and the Black feminist ethos. So I'm interested, as I tell people all the time, in the now. I love that we wrote the statement. I love that I had an opportunity as a young person to find a political home that was meaningful, where I could truly be fully present, not having to fight battles that had nothing to do with the real thing we were going for. So I'm hopeful, but I'm also very much in the present. What are we doing now? What's happening right now? How does that thread connect to the past? How do we synthesize more of what we learned in that experience? Because it was a lot. All right, I'm done.
Listen, I'm excited to hear more. Thank you so much, Demita. Miss Barbara? Oh, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. How does it feel to know that Combahee has been around since, for 50 years. Well, besides feeling older than dirt, it's gratifying, it's gratifying. And what's gratifying is I'm looking at the chat as we are convened here. And thank you everyone for taking time to come together with us. It's just really amazing that something that we did as grassroots Black feminist, without portfolio, without any institutional backing whatsoever, that it would last this long. And I think that of course most people know us because of the Combahee River Collective statement, which laid out a politic that up until that point had not been so clearly shared. And the fact that people still look at it, still teach it, still read it, still want to talk about it, I think is really quite wonderful. And Demita and I and my sister Beverly, we know the conditions under which we created that. Great. And it was between all of our other commitments, trying to keep body and soul together. People think that because they read something that's printed, now of course everything's on computers, but at a time, when I think of doesn't mean publics, I think about words on paper. Right. But people think that when they read something that is on paper, that it means you have a certain kind of life, like the way they show in the movies. Not that they haven't made a movie yet about unruly Black feminists. They will, but they think you live a certain kind of life, and in reality, we were scuffling. We were scuffling. We did. And we're still trying to make a difference in the world. Thank you for giving us opportunity. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to have this kind of thoughtful conversation.
Yeah. Oh my, why are you thanking me? Thank you. I mean, thank you. It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, it's a dream come true, and it's an honor to even know you both personally and to get to chat with you. And y'all will hear how hilarious these two are. So it's just gotten started. So
we're behaving right now.
Yeah, we are behaving. We are behaving. Yeah.
And I actually prefer y'all not to behave, since y'all are unruly.
I mean, that will come. If you let us play off of each other as opposed to do that.
Yes.
Just let us just converse.
Yes. Yeah.
Then you'll see what happens. Then you'll see what happens.
So my next question is, it's about the Combahee River Collective statement published in 1977, co-authored by you, Demita. Y'all also, I just want to pause because I have a problem calling Miss Barbara by her first name. So I always pause when I say Barbara. So I'm just going to say Miss Barbara. And Beverly Smith. Y'all discussed the genesis of contemporary Black feminism, obviously Combahee's organizational beliefs, problems in organizing Black feminists and Black feminist issues in practice. You also write about the inception of the organization and the importance of having a radical socialist class analysis. And as we've seen 50 years since Combahee and after Combahee, y'all are both committed to radical Black feminist world making. So I'm very curious to know more about your personal genesis to radical Black feminist politics. Who and what shaped your practice, and what checks and balances have you put in place to maintain your radical Black feminist commitments?
I have to say something. I think one of the things that gets lost often when people think about what it was like for us organizing back in the early 70s. And I want people to imagine, for some of us anyway, and I would say I can't speak for all of us, but I can certainly say the issues that brought us together, for me anyway, was about trying to find a place where we could manifest our true powers of organizing, thinking, talking, reasoning. Because in every environment where we found ourselves as Black women, with men, it was problematic because of the misogynoir and because of patriarchal attitudes, so that, you couldn't really, at least my experience as a young woman, as a young teenager who was looking to be involved in organizations that had a very, can't call it patriarchal, but let's just call it a very male perspective. The Black Panther Party, which was of course founded by women and men, had a very clear kind of projection onto the public that was really, really much more, you see much more about the men who were involved and not so much the women. And to bring a perspective that was about trying to understand what we could do as a contribution to nation building, only to be sort of turned back in a multitude of ways, as if we didn't really have the right, as if we were like, why are you interfering? I had so many situations where I would ask questions in meetings, and then people would try to shoo me, and that's never going to work with me because you can't do that. So I remember the frustrations of longing for a place where we could come together to do the work that we knew was important to getting free, unimpeded. I was going to use a really salty term, but keep it clean tonight. We had so many, and it was not just in organizations that were building around the civil rights movement, around the freedom movements, around the issues of radical Black politics. White feminists also, at the time, there was conflict for me anyway, with a lot of the women with whom I could have concert with, because the issues of reproductive rights, the issues of sterilization abuse, there was an array of issues as a feminist and a Black feminist that I was very interested in creating a space for myself with other people who were organizing. And of course, when you're talking about dealing with cross-racial coalition building, if people are not prepared to deal with white privilege and structural racism, et cetera, and I was also young, I have to say that, even raising the issue, there were times when I felt like, am I jeopardizing a chance to build a coalition that's stronger? Or can we just have a real conversation about the ways in which the ways we interact are impeding us based on race? So we come together as Combahee, and you're not talking about, it's not idyllic because we're still humans, but there was a way in which we could be with one another. I could be with other Black women who were interested in nation building, in getting free, in allowing, not just allowing, but supporting the idea that everyone had to be involved, that there was no one place for any group of people, one person. No, it was going to be cross-gender, it was going to be integrated in that sense. And we had to create Black feminism to make that space. That's how I feel.
Thank you so much.
I believe that you asked, I'm so sorry. I believe that you asked Jamie about like kind of where did our Black feminism come from? What were the roots, what was going on? And I have written about this on more than one occasion. I really feel that the family that I was raised in, although they were not activists by any conventional definition of that word, but they were race women who had come to Earth in the late 19th century and of the early 20th century in the Jim Crow South, namely Georgia. And if you know anything about the history of lynching in the United States, Georgia had the second most lynchings, the second highest number of lynchings after Mississippi. So Mississippi and Georgia, no joke. And I feel really privileged. I've always felt privileged to have grown up in a family that understood the contradictions of living under white supremacy, and yet also was not interested in buckling and bowing to those conditions. And seeing the kind of way that people in my family took on responsibility and had a certain amount of dignity about themselves, that was very useful. And I was writing about this recently, and the thing that I said is that after I went to a women's college, namely Mount Holyoke, which is the oldest of the 7 sister colleges, and the best. But oh no, I slipped. But be that as it may, so like when we were doing Black student organizing in those college years of the late 1960s, it was all women. It was all Black women. And when I first got involved in Combahee, I said, huh, this feels familiar. This is kind of familiar. And then I realized it was because as a student in college that the organizing that we were doing was also Black woman led. And then when I left that environment and went into the so-called real world, sexism and misogyny just hit me right dead up, in the face. I couldn't even get I couldn't even establish credit to buy a typewriter, a portable electric typewriter, which was kind of state of the art at the time. I couldn't even get credit in my own name to buy a typewriter so I could pursue my graduate studies in literature. Because why? Because I wasn't married and have a male relative to vouch for me. And so I asked my dear aunt who raised my sister and me after our mother died at a very early age. He at an early age, my sister and I at the age of 9. And I asked her, would she put it on her JCPenney charge card? And she did. But all these things that we would bump up against, all these assumptions. And like I had never been told by anyone at my home that because we were defined as women at birth, because we know that identity and gender are fluid and not as simplistic as it was back in the 1940s when my sister and I were born. But for those of us who were defined as women at birth, no one in my family ever said, and that means that you're inferior. That means that you don't get to do anything that you want to do. It was just like, no, we got to get this done. Whatever it is, we're going to get this done. And it wasn't particularly aggressive or anything. It was just like, this is what's laid out before us and we can do it, and you can do it too. I never got messages that I was inherently inferior because I wasn't a boy.
Right. I just want to echo something, Barbara. That's so perfect because one of the other things that's interesting about having Southern, being first generation born outside the South, is that if you are lucky, because white supremacy grinds our people down, it can create incredible dislocations in families across generations. If we're lucky, we have the race people who, like you said, were not necessarily big organizers, but my mother would say we had our stuff together. My mother told me when I was 6 years old, they're going to tell you that white people are superior to you. You're going to hear that. It's a lie. And she was quite, no, just straight up. And I'm, of course, at that age, you're just, yes, your mama, whatever you say, yes. And because she also, I want to say to echo Barbara, I never, when people would start talking about that we were socialized as young girls and young women, that just wasn't my experience. I grew up, I have a younger sister. We're basically Irish twins. We're a year and 7 months apart. And I was the one that put things together because I was the mechanical one and the sort of the, I like to tinker. And whenever something would come in the house, my mother's like, oh, this is really complicated. She would just give me the information and have me take care of it. And that includes like hooking up the electric stove and a few other things that I think back, I didn't know. However, always, the emphasis on the fact that you have a brain, you are meant to think, you are meant to get an education. And for all the reasons that they would tell you, get an education, they can't take that away from you. Get an education because you don't want to depend on any man for anything, take care of your business. And then the other thing too is that there is nothing, I think, sweeter and more delicious than a Black older female relative who thinks you are everything because you're smart. It really does excise all the negativity that comes at you just being a Black child walking around in the world. It's the same feeling I used to get when they would say things like, you're just a mess. And they don't mean that in a bad way. They mean that like, how did you think of that? So to echo you, Barbara, I mean, that's the wonderful thing about, also, I want to say, most of us in Combahee were Midwesterners. I just want to put that out here. People start having, I'm ready to have beef with people who think that, all the bright thinking and everything is happening on the East and West Coast. No. Detroit, Cleveland, Chicago, even Memphis, I consider to be kind of the Midwest, even though it's part of the North-South. It's just been such a fertile ground and space for things that I could go on, but I'm very proud to be a Midwesterner, a Black Midwesterner.
So am I. I am
Yes.
too. This is something that Demita and I have been talking about a lot recently.
Yes.
And she asked me questions about, was it like this in Cleveland? And often the answer is, oh yeah, it was like that. Even though Chicago is quite a bit larger, is the second city.
That's right.
Cleveland was also one of the 10 largest cities in the United States at the time.
That's right.
I grew up in a metropolis,
Right.
not Superman's metropolis, but another one. But the thing is that, yeah, I mean, we had a really cultural or urban experience and a very vibrant Black community
Yes.
During those mid 20th century decades.
Yes.
Definitely. Thank y'all so much. You should see in the chat, like Black Midwesterners stand up. That's what some of the comments are saying. So my next question is, I'm very curious about if y'all can share some insights on the difficulties, joys, and triumphs of Black feminist organizing, during Combahee and after Combahee.
So when Barbara and I were talking about this event tonight, something clicked for me again of what someone said to me. First of all, imagine that we are Black feminists attempting to create a Black feminism within the Black community, a movement that is grounded in the people we live next door to, churched or unchurched, people that you knew from those communities. And I remember distinctly the suspicion and the concern that, what is this white feminist nonsense you're bringing to us? And it's like, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about real issues that affect the everyday lives of everyday Black women and therefore the Black community. So it was, I remember meeting up with someone who became a famous judge later on, Black woman. We were at an event where I was told, we were at an event, it was public. I walked in, she looked at me and said, "Oh, you're that Black feminist I've been hearing about." And, even though I'm I was 23, I guess, I somehow managed to get it together. And I said, "Well, what are you talking about?" And she explained, and she's a socialist, and explained to me that things like, she just was not really helpful because she was hostile. We later became collegial friends and then friends. And she said to me that one of the things that she knew we would have to confront is that Black feminism as an ethos, as a project, was being created. And that's what happens when people don't know your track record, know who you are, etc. Two things also. Everyone would tell me every once in a while, "Well, you have all those lesbians in there." And we're like, "Yeah, we do. So, and your problem would be what?" Anybody who's willing to put their shoulder to the wheel for the process of freedom is going to be a part of this organization. So if you've got an issue with that, we're sorry, but it's not going to work out for you. We never had to, I don't remember actually having to ever say that, but then years later, this same sort of person, part of this group, said to me, "It really wasn't the lesbianism, And I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "It was the communism." And I just was like, "Okay, all right." Well, so it is not surprising to me, given that within the African American community, there is a strong central sort of position that people take around being extreme about your politics and your analysis about capitalism. People, they want capitalism to work for them because, it's better than the alternative, I suppose, in their minds. But to have an analysis, to have a willingness to say that this is not an analysis that's based in certainly Marx, yes, but also as an extension to the Black socialists and intellectuals who were writing in the 30s, the 40s, it wasn't an isolated matter. It was that we were bringing a conversation about something to people who were not necessarily interested. So you end up not focusing on training people, teaching them why they should be X, Y, or Z. Focusing on the issues that really mattered to Black women was where we knew that was our bread and butter, so to speak.
Thank you so much.
There's a lot that, there's a lot that's was challenging about being a Black feminist in the mid 1970s and to the late 1970s in a city called Boston. Boston is one of the most racist cities in the United States, which is saying quite a bit. And we were doing our organizing. I think it's so important that people understand that we were doing our organizing in the context of a race war.
Right.
And that race war was over school desegregation and school busing. It was a serious war where
Right.
people were beaten, people were attacked, people were shot.
And died.
And yet we had this vision of, well, maybe we could bring some of these elements together. That is, we could, be bridges across different communities and talk about things that people don't want to talk about, like violence against women.
Right.
Because that's a basic bottom line feminist issue. It's not an issue that makes people comfortable. We definitely did a lot of organizing around violence against women, but not always welcome. Not always welcome to do that. One of the things that Demita said that I think is important to reiterate is that we really did have a great commitment and desire for our work to be grounded in the Black community, however that might be defined. We were not Black women or Black people who were running away from our Blackness. We saw, looking at gender politics, racial politics, class politics, sexuality politics, we saw that as being very, 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 very Black.
Right.
But whether people agreed with that or not, that's where we were coming from. One of the things that used to happen, much as Demita described, with certain individuals, is that they stereotyped us terribly. And then when, in some instances, they had a chance to have a conversation, and I'm talking about, of course, my individual experience here, it's like, oh, you really think that? You believe that? You're down with this? You're down with that? I said, yeah, I'm a Black person. Go figure. And there's, so many stereotypes, so much negativity. One of the things about the political moment that we're in right now, with the global movement to end the genocide, to stop the genocide in Gaza, and to have, and also to end the occupation, which is the source of the conditions that we face and that people are facing in Gaza. People talk about how multi whatever the movements here in the United States are, and how all kinds of people are working together, and also how there's a lot of leadership of Black and other people of color in the movement for ceasefire, and the movement to end the genocide and to free Palestine. They're very interested in that. That's like directly rooted, I believe, in the work of Combahee, because we were asserting that you could be different kinds of people, that everybody didn't have to be cookie cutter exactly the same,
Right.
and that we could uplift the most important issues and uplift them by working on them, organizing around them. As Demita said, if you're willing to put your shoulder to the wheel, what difference does it make if you're queer? Well, I have to tell you, back in the mid-70s, it made a damn big lot of difference. It made a lot of difference because we were organizing also less than a decade after Stonewall.
Right.
And we were dealing with those very, very backwards kinds of attitudes. So as I say, we love to joke, Demita and I say, we were not the popular girls. We were never popular. We hadn't been popular. We weren't popular then, not really particularly popular now, and that's okay.
Hold on.
It's okay.
That's not
okay.
true.
Well, you may think, I know that we are still those kind of people, Demita and I. We are still those kind of people. We weren't trying to be popular. We weren't trying to be accepted by the masses, or anything. We wanted mass liberation, but we weren't trying to just fit. We were trying to fit in. We were not necessarily spending all of our time trying to fit in.
Right.
So
exactly.
anyway,
And can I
So
just,
we had good preparation. Our high school years probably prepared us to be like, you know, the aunt in the attic.
well, and there's something else we should remember too. We were kind of intergenerational even at the point of Combahee. Barbara and Beverly are 7 years older than I am. We wouldn't have been hanging out because I would have been Jay would have been the babysitter. But that's important because it also tells me, as we think about organizing and what we have to do in order to make organizing work, we have to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that people are winning where they enter, what point in life, what are they bringing to the table, cannot always look exactly as we might think. I remember one of the things that I was always really aware of back in the time that we were organizing, for example, for Casa Mirna Vasquez, it's the largest battered women's shelter in New England now. And we were part of a coalition of a huge number of people from the South End, from IBA, which was an organization of Latinos who had done significant work about housing in the South End. We really, one of the things I think about our Midwestern roots and also about the fact that we were raised by Black women, you learn how to engage without a knife. You learn how to engage using your intellect, but also I had to learn in that organization. We had that priest who had to leave our group in our group at one point because we were supporting reproductive rights and abortion. And he said that he made a very eloquent statement at this meeting. And I remember loving the fact that I knew how to keep it together. I wasn't going to jump up and be in his face and, doing what people sometimes do now, which is that browbeating one another. Making coalitions work means having to accept the limitations that come when people have equally strong feelings. And he wasn't trying to stop me from getting an abortion. He wasn't trying to stop anybody. He was just saying what his limitations were. Understanding how to work in that environment, to me, felt very Black, like knowing how to do that came out of my Southern roots. And I'm a Chisisipian people. I just want to point that out. We have a new word. There's a Black woman writer in the Chicago Tribune, in the Sun-Times, who coined it, and at the front of who she is. There is that hybrid sense of understanding there may be limits, but that it's not a reason not to work with someone unless the limits are of the type of thing that are oppressive and creating more oppression. So I just wanted to make sure that we made that, because it's important. We had people younger than myself who were part of Combahee and who were still in college or just getting into college. So it brought a different flavor, an interesting flavor.
Demita, really quickly, people are asking what was the term, they missed it, that you mentioned.
Oh, Chisisipian?
Okay.
So Chicago, Mississippian, Chisisipian. Sorry,
okay,
I wish I coined it.
Perfect. So thank y'all for sharing. So we have one more question before we bring Anastácia on to read her remarks, but I'm curious, looking back 50 years later, what has changed in terms of obviously like the social, political, and economic positions of our world, but also what has changed within Black feminist politics, what has remained the same, and what needs to be transformed?
I'm going to grab that one. Yeah, I really like to grab that one.
Please.
I haven't really done explicitly Black feminist organizing for a couple of decades. I would say that the last time I was involved in Black feminist organizing, and you'll find this, curious perhaps, was when I represented the working poor Black community where I lived for 34 years in Albany, Haudenosaunee, Mohican, Mohawk, unceded land. That a lot of the people, and I was a member of our city council, we call it the Common Council. So people think that it's some other kind of organizations. It's a city council, but in certain places they call those bodies common councils. You're elected, you have to run for office. And I was on that council for 2 terms. Most of the people who contacted me about issues as miscellaneous as cracked, broken sidewalks. I actually one day, not personally, but I actually did what needed to be done to get a cat out of a tree. you know. Yeah. I know you love that, Demita. The very thought of it, yes. But Demita is a cat person.
And
I
Barbara's
may be,
allergic.
yes, but I may be one. I may be a secret one. But my allergies prevent whatever. But anyway, yeah, cats were an important part of Combahee's culture. But anyway, also going to school meetings with parents, often grandmothers, because of issues that their kids, their grandchildren or children were having in the schools, all kinds of things. And I just thought, this is Black feminism in practice. The way that we would have meetings. You were talking about how you functioned in a meeting when someone expressed a view that was very opposite of your perspective. And yet you were able to sit with that and not disrupt and completely blow up the meeting because the person had a different perspective from you. And I have had that very same experience, you know. I mean, I was dealing with police people. I like calling them police people. Because of the first, my first term on the Common Council, I was vice chair of public safety. Never held office in my life, and somehow I got to be vice chair of a committee my first term on the council, and then the second term on the council, I was chair of public safety. So I was dealing with fire, police, and codes. You know, my committee, the public safety committee, had oversight over all those departments. The things that I heard, the things that I saw. You know. And it's like often, particularly in the first term, I would think, what in the world am I doing in a place like this? But what I was trying to do was to bring a different kind of advocacy and a different kind of listening to people to find out what they needed. I always said, you don't know what people need until they tell you. I mean, I may think the most important thing is fixing sidewalks, you know. But when they tell me, oh, no, it's not the sidewalks, it's like, how do kids get back and forth from school safely? That's what we're concerned about. And then you shift, you know, you're like I like the idea of being a public servant. I liked it at that time. I never thought I would be doing anything remotely like that, but I consider it to have been a really important part of my education, my adult education. And that was Black feminist work. Most of the work I do now, some of it is around continuing city police issues. Also housing, very involved in a group that focuses on housing, not because I have expertise, but because of the fact I'm in a group with people who do have expertise. And we really monitor what's going on around eviction protections, representation in eviction courts, like no fault, you know, all kinds of things that kind of were in place during the height of the COVID pandemic, which has not ended. But yeah, those kind of issues. And then you may see, depending on how this is showing up, I have a button that is about solidarity with Ukraine. And I also have a Palestinian flag, and I'm doing those things simultaneously. Everything I do it with a Black feminist consciousness.
Yes.
So there's that. When it's kind of put a ribbon around this and finish talking about this topic. Black feminism is not a fashion statement. It is not, a way of being cute in the world. Black feminism at its best is about digging underneath why there is so much injustice, so much violence, so much exploitation, so much imperialism, so much colonialism still. Why all these things, so much warfare, and trying to get to the bottom of those things and to accountably deal with them in a multi-issued way. That's what I think Black feminism is about. It is not a lifestyle. It's not, it's like doing the work. And wherever whatever the situations are that are the most pressing at the time, I hope that I can be somewhere near those. One of those is, of course, climate disaster. And I'm sure Demita has a lot more to say about that than I do. But we are both fully aware that that's what's happening with us here on planet Earth.
Can I just please add, Barbara, thank you for all of that, because you just reminded me of three things. When people talk about intersectionality now, the way it's thrown around and bandied about, the thing that's interesting for us was looking at the power that takes place at that intersection and the possibilities of really building coalitions that happen when you look and exploit, in the most positive meaning of that word, that dynamic. One of the things that got me there, even thinking about this, and this goes back to the Black Panther Party, was when the Rainbow Coalition was created by the men who were part of the sort of outreach to white, poor radicals and Latinos in Chicago. No one wanted to talk about anti-Black racism coming from either of those communities. And I remember saying to, may he rest in peace, one of the members of the organizing coalition, and I said, this would be great if we could have a conversation about the ways in which how we, the things that don't get talked about, the things that happen, the microaggressions that happen amongst us. And I was new, Chicago's very segregated as a city. I didn't grow up around, I grew up around a lot of diverse Black folk, but not people from other racial backgrounds. I was really shocked and didn't even know that there was such a thing as anti-Black racism in the Latino community. How are we going to build a coalition, a true coalition, without surfacing that and recognizing the ways in which it interferes with authentic organizing? So I feel like, and even today, as I talk to people in Puerto Rico, I engage with people across, whether it's Latin America, the Philippines, wherever there have been like Spaniards as as people who cause trouble. I've always said we need to focus on these issues to the degree that we can, because they are going to continue surfacing and creating friction that keeps us not focusing on the actual jobs that we're trying to do, the work we're trying to do, but interfere with leadership, interfere with true relational parity. So I think something that you said, Barbara, just really clicked for me is like, this is not a game, it's not a joke. When we talk about who we're talking about also, I'm very, Barbara's heard me talk about this. I don't see the emphasis on poor Black women that I want to see coming from my young Black feminist sisters. I am really astounded to see how considerations that were just taken for granted back in the 70s about sliding scale for attendance to meetings and the provision of childcare, when you know that people can't come, childcare is ridiculous. But there's also a detachment from the reality of everyday Black women's lives. And we are not all Fresh Prince in Bel-Air. We are not that at all. We're not even, single ladies, whatever that show was. We are, as Black people, more segregated now than we were when Barbara and I were coming up as young people. And poverty has affected Black women and brown women in ways that we are still not really talking about. So my question is, what's going on, those of you who are organizing Black feminist organizations? Why isn't poverty, why isn't the fact of poor Black women's realities center to the work that you're doing?
Thank you.
I love that, because that's about class consciousness.
Absolutely.
Yes. And
also where Black feminism can live successfully is in the academy, in organizations where we're closeted and we're not having to really interact across class lines. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm laughing because yes, you should see in the chat, everyone's agreeing, and we've had these discussions before many times, but what about working class and poor Black women and gender expansive folks? What about not making it seem as Black feminism only lives in the academy and belongs to Black women academics who may not always be Black feminists themselves or do not have a working class or poor Black feminist consciousness?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think this is very, very important. And how are we centering, or not centering, but how are we making sure we have an internationalist focus within our Black feminism as well, disrupting, this notion that Western US-based feminism or global North US-based feminisms are the only feminisms, which is not true, which speaks to the work that you all do. And so this also speaks to the work of Anastácia Flora Oliveira,
Right.
who is Black Women Radicals' first Dandara dos Palmares Internationalist Black Feminist Fellow.
Mm.
Woo! Who is from South Felix, Bahia, Brazil, who will offer her remarks about, the impact of Combahee as a Black lesbian feminist from Bahia, Brazil. And we also have the amazing Evelyn Rodriguez, who is going to be translating Anastácia's remarks to English. And so, Anna, so happy that you're here and being able to speak to, Miss Barbara and Demita about the impact that they've had on you.
Hi, olá, good evening, boa noite. Hi, everyone. My name is Anastácia Flora. I'm learning English, but sorry. Now I will speak in Portuguese, for my presentation. Quero agradecer ao Black Woman Radical pela oportunidade de estar neste evento, conhecendo o trabalho do coletivo Combahee River.
I would like to thank Black Women Radicals for the opportunity to be at this event, to learn about the work of the Combahee River Collective.
É uma honra estar ao lado de Demita Frazier e Barbara Smith, feministas negras americanas que revolucionaram e revolucionam radicalmente nos Estados Unidos e influenciam outros movimentos feministas radicais negras pelo mundo.
It's an honor to be alongside Demita Frazier and Barbara Smith, Black American feminists who have revolutionized and are revolutionizing radically in the United States and influencing other Black radical feminist movements around the world.
Antes de me apresentar, quero dizer de onde eu venho. Sou do Brasil, sou do Recôncavo da Bahia, sou de São Félix.
Before I start, I would like to talk about where I come from. I'm from Brazil. I'm from the Recôncavo of Bahia. I'm from São Félix.
Me situo de onde eu venho, porque ser de lá afirma quem eu sou.
I situate myself where I come from because being from there affirms who I am.
É deste lugar que eu construo rotas de liberdade, é deste lugar que eu enxergo o mundo. A esta terra eu tenho todo o respeito e sempre reverenciarei.
It is from this place that I build freedom, roots. It is from this place that I see the world. I have every respect for this land and will always honor it.
Sabermos quem somos, mesmo que o mundo nos negue esse direito, foi o primeiro aprendizado que eu recebi das minhas mais velhas.
Knowing who we are, even if the world denies us that right, was the first thing I learned from my elders.
Que não se intitulavam como feministas negras, mas atuavam como uma.
Who didn't call themselves as Black feminists, but acted like one.
Sou sapatão negra, fotógrafa e pesquisadora da imagem. Sou a primeira bolsista do programa Dandara dos Palmares.
I'm a Black lesbian woman, photographer, and image researcher. I'm the first scholar in the Dandara dos Palmares scholarship program.
Faço parte da organização transnacional Atlantic Archives. Faço mestrado em estudos étnicos e africanos na Universidade Federal da Bahia.
I'm part of the transnational organization Atlantic Archives. I'm doing a master's degree in ethnic and African studies at the Federal University of Bahia.
Minha pesquisa é sobre acervos fotográficos de famílias negras do Recôncavo da Bahia.
My research focuses on the photographic collection of Black families in the Recôncavo region of Bahia.
No Brasil, existe dentro dos movimentos de mulheres negras uma cantiga.
In Brazil, there is a song within the Black women's movement.
Companheira, me ajude, que eu não posso andar só. Sozinha ando bem, mas com você ando melhor.
My partner help me. I can walk alone. Alone I walk well. I walk well, but with you I walk better.
Essa é uma cantiga cantada em muitos encontros e movimentos de mulheres negras. Muitos dos encontros são realizados em casas ou espaços cedidos.
This is a song sung at many meetings and movements of Black women. Many of the meetings are held in homes or spaces that have been provided.
Nesses encontros são discutidos estratégias e articulações políticas contra a violência, o genocídio, a invasão de terra, entre outras opressões e condições que é dadas para as mulheres negras e pessoas negras no Brasil.
These meetings discuss strategies and political articulations against violence, genocide, land invasion, and other oppressions and conditions that are given to Black women and Black people in Brazil.
Se hoje esse movimento acontece no mundo, devemos saudar os movimentos radicais de mulheres negras que vieram antes de nós, como o movimento liderado por Dandara dos Palmares no período da escravidão do Brasil.
If this movement is happening today and around the world, we must salute the radical movements of Black women that came before us, such as the movement led by Dandara dos Palmares during the period of slavery in Brazil.
E o coletivo Combahee River, que luta desde os anos 60 para a criação de novos modelos de transformação social e pela liberdade na vida e na experiência de mulheres negras.
And the Combahee Collective, which has been fighting since 1960 to create new models of social transformation and for freedom in the lives of and experiences of Black women.
Me lembro da primeira vez que eu participei de uma construção de uma carta manifesto. Em 2017, participei do segundo Encontro Nacional de Negras Jovens Feministas.
I remember the first time I participated in the drafting of a letter of manifesto. In 2017, I participated in the second national meeting of young Black feminists.
Foram centenas de jovens negras dos estados brasileiros pensando e articulando novas possibilidades para o bem viver da população negra do país.
There were hundreds of young Black women from all over Brazil reflecting and articulating new possibilities for the well-being of the country's Black population.
No final do encontro, sentamos e construímos uma carta manifesto. Me lembrei desse episódio quando recentemente eu li o manifesto do coletivo Combahee River, que foi traduzido recentemente aqui no Brasil.
At the end of the meeting, we sat down and drew up a manifesto letter. I was reminded of the episode when I recently read the manifesto of the Combahee River Collective, which was recently translated here in Brazil.
Este é um manifesto de grande referência para lutas de libertação. Por ler o manifesto do coletivo, reli a carta manifesto do encontro e gostaria de compartilhar aqui, porque também fala como Dandara é um ancestral importante que evocamos em nossos movimentos de luta no Brasil.
This is a manifesto of great reference for liberation struggles. After reading the collective's manifesto, I reread the letter manifesto of the meeting, and I would like to share it here because it also talks about how Dandara is an important ancestor that we evoke in our struggle movements in Brazil.
Marchamos para que esta mobilização continue incansavelmente pelo fim do racismo, do machismo, da lesbitransfobia, das violências vindas do patriarcado que sofremos. Tá.
We march so that the mobilization continues tirelessly, for an end to racism, sexism, lesbian, bi, transphobia, the violence coming from the patriarchy that we suffer and against which we resist.
E contra as quais resistimos por inspiração de Dandara e todas que somos herdeiras.
Inspired by Dandara and all of whom we are heirs.
Por esse sentido, mesmo estando em países diferentes, somos feministas negras que reivindicamos e lutamos incansavelmente pelo direito de estar vivos em qualquer lugar da diáspora que sofreu brutalmente com o processo colonial.
For this reason, even though we are in different countries, we are Black feminists who claim and fight tirelessly for the right to be alive anywhere in the diaspora that has suffered brutally from the colonial process.
E evocamos a força das nossas ancestrais para nos fortalecer e seguirmos reivindicando. Assim, eu aprendi e a cada dia aprendo com movimentos de feministas negras a importância de sabermos a nossa história e nos organizarmos coletivamente para combatermos as opressões.
And we call on the strength of our ancestors to strengthen us and keep on claiming. This is how I learned and learn every day from Black feminist movements, the importance of knowing our history and organizing collectively to fight oppression.
E é por isso que o meu olhar é direcionado pelo modo como eu enxergo o mundo sem as câmeras. Ao refletir sobre fotografia e construção da imagem, não podemos desassociar as questões raciais.
And that's why my perspective is directed by the way I see the world without cameras. When reflecting on photography and image construction, we cannot dissociate racial issues.
É através das imagens que nós estamos também radicalmente construindo nossas próprias narrativas. O feminismo negro me ensinou a importância da imagem e de construirmos outras visualidades de nós, pessoas negras em diáspora.
It is through images that we are also radically constructing our own narratives. Black feminism has taught me the importance of the image and of constructing other visualities of ourselves, Black people in the diaspora.
Sou uma sujeita à procura da imagem. Procuro insistentemente pela imagem. A Beatriz Nascimento, uma intelectual feminista negra brasileira, nos provocou a pensarmos como um processo de escravização nos deu uma experiência de perda da imagem.
I'm an image seeker. I search persistently for the image. Beatriz Nascimento, a Black Brazilian feminist intellectual, provoked us to think about how the process of enslavement gave us the experience of losing our image.
A perda e a falta são estratégias coloniais de desestruturação e desumanização das pessoas negras. Afinal, o que somos, se não uma ficção colonial, uma imagem inventada?
Loss and lack are colonial strategies for destructuring and dehumanizing Black people. After all, what are we if not a colonial fiction, an invented image?
O esquecimento, a falta da memória, o não pertencimento foram impostos para nós, mas sobrevivemos ao tempo, nos reinventando e fabulando novas narrativas de nós mesmos.
Forgetfulness, lack of memory, not belonging have been imposed on us, but we have survived time, reinventing ourselves and fabricating new narratives of ourselves.
Durante a travessia transatlântica, assim como os nossos corpos, a nossa imagem foi usurpada e ficcionada. Agora é o momento de buscá-la ou inventá-las.
During the transatlantic crossing, just like our bodies, our image was stolen and fictionalized. Now is the time to seek it out and or invent it.
Por isso entendo a importância da fotografia para nós, pessoas negras. Acredito no poder das imagens.
That's why I understand the importance of photography for us Black people.
Como Rosana Paulino, uma artista visual negra brasileira, diz, imagens curam imagens. A fotografia é um processo de cura. A fotografia é a forma que eu tenho de falar das nossas vidas, de trazer um outro olhar para o meu lugar.
I believe in the power of images. As Rosana Paulino, a Black Brazilian visual artist, says, images heal images. Photography is a healing process. Photography is my way of talking about our lives, of bringing a different perspective to my place.
Falar da fotografia é pensar a memória. A fotografia são a materialidade das memórias.
To talk about photography is to think about memory. Photographs are the materiality of memories.
Existe uma técnica na fotografia chamada dupla exposição, onde há sobreposição de duas ou mais fotos, formando uma outra imagem.
There is a technique in photography called double exposure, where two or more photos are superimposed to form another image.
Penso que a memória negra diaspórica é utilizar uma dupla exposição. Não podemos esquecer as memórias da escravidão e a colonização, que ainda estão granuladas nas nossas existências, mas estamos sobrepondo outras memórias que emergem das fissuras, criando outras possibilidades.
I think that diasporic Black memory is using a double exposure. We can't forget the memories of slavery and colonization that are still grainy in our existences, but we are superimposing other memories that emerge from the cracks, creating other possibilities.
Este é meu dever enquanto fotógrafa no mundo. Obrigada, thank you.
This is my duty as a photographer in the world. Thank you.
Ah, wonderful.
Obrigada, Ana.
Yes, 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 yes.
Well, and thank you so much, Evelyn. I also just wanted to ask, after Anna's wonderful remarks, she's talked about Dandara dos Palmares, who was a queen of
Right.
the Palmares, Quilombo, and who resisted the Portuguese till her death. She talked about another amazing Black Brazilian feminist, intellectual thinker, Beatriz Nascimento. And so I also, and connected all of this to the impact of Combahee. And I just want to know how you, Miss Barbara and Demita, how y'all feel about the internationalist impact of your work.
Barbara, the Seychelles.
Right.
So I'll be brief. Back in the 1970s, and I think they got in touch with you, Barbara, initially, someone through maybe Great Britain. Maybe I should leave you to tell the story, but for us to have been in touch with Black women from the Seychelles islands I had never heard of and didn't even know existed on the east coast of Africa, and they contacted us. Barbara, can you fill us in with the rest of it?
All I remember is the person coming to visit us
Yes.
at least one of our meetings. I don't remember the whys and the wherefores, and you're right that perhaps they found out, because I've thought about that. You mentioned, when we have our conversations, that is Demita's and my like private conversations, you have brought that up. And I've often thought, like, and how did they find us? Because there's no internet, there's no this, there's no that. And the thing is, I think you said something just now, because I had gone to the United Kingdom in 1977 and met Black feminists there, which included people of South Asian heritage.
Yes.
Very vibrant Black feminist movement at a time, well, when the United Kingdom was just doing its usual thing.
Yes.
And Brixton, there, so much racism and police brutality, etc. Just so many parallels. So it probably was through one of the people who I met during that trip who connected us. And yes, all I can remember is this person coming to visit. I don't remember exactly what we talked about. I just remember that it was incredibly special. And in those days, we referred to ourselves, as did most people in our left movements of color, we refer to ourselves as third world women.
That's correct. That's
So the term
correct.
women of color was not being used at that time. And we saw ourselves as a part of the struggles for third world independence and independence of nations that were pulling away from and throwing off the chains of colonization and imperialism.
Right.
And the analysis was that people of color in the United States are internally colonized.
Right.
So we saw these connections. I'm thinking about the Third World Women's Alliance.
Yes.
That published a newspaper. I think it was called, was it Double Jeopardy or Triple Jeopardy?
Yes.
And Francis Veal, people who came out of SNCC.
Yes.
So this continuum of incredible, courageous Black-led activism. But as I said, we identified with the global movements for liberation at that time, and sometimes we had the opportunity to actually interact. Now, as far as what Anastácia has just shared with us, wonderful, and that Evelyn made it possible for us to comprehend. I know that Demita probably understood most of what was said. I know that you're fluent in at least one other language besides the one we're speaking right at this moment. But in any event, I really appreciate it. And I've always wanted to go to Brazil from the point that I found out it had the largest population of Black people anywhere outside of the African continent. I said, oh, that's for me. That
Yes.
sounds like the right place for me to go. Unfortunately, I haven't gotten there, and my travel has been constrained by something called being older, but always had great interest in your homeland. And I'm so glad
Yes.
we could do something together.
Yes, same. Mm.
So happy. Yes, thank you all so much. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Evelyn. It's an honor to have y'all on. And so I have a couple more questions, but we're about to wrap up soon and we have tons of questions from other people. I just want to say, audience members, we may not get to your questions because we have time constraints, okay? Please don't hurt me, but honor. Y'all been really getting me. We have to honor our guests' time and everyone's time. So my next question is, looking back, what advice would you give to yourself 50 years ago when you were organizing, founding Combahee? What have you learned about yourself since then?
So much. Barbara?
The main thing I would say to that younger self is like, don't take everything so personally as you know, like an attempt on decimation of your core. Like,
Right.
I think the older that I've gotten, the more kind of confident I've been as an earth being living down here. Because I think that I mean, Demita is a sensitive person. My sister is a sensitive person. I'm a sensitive person. If we weren't sensitive, we never would have built these politics.
Right.
But sometimes that sensitivity can make it really hard to go forward because, you know, like I'm the first person to internalize something that is negative and think that it's all my fault.
Mhm.
So, you know, I still can think that. I can still think that, but I try to do a little bit better. And there's not that much that I would change about our political practice at the time because we were incredibly energetic. We were
Mhm.
open to hearing people's points of view to
Right.
the degree that we would do anti-racism trainings at the invitation of a white women's organization. We would actually do that.
Right.
We would put ourselves in the position of having to hear what they had to say about their racial experiences up until that point of their adulthood.
Mhm.
We were open when a Black man was accused of raping at least two white women in Brighton, I believe.
Yes.
And that and Boston was just like so segregated. There are people who are living in neighborhoods now. When I talk to them, they say where they live. I said, I've never been there because it was like you dare not go there. But
Right.
in any event, like when we were approached, asked if we would be in solidarity around this trumped up, kangaroo court type proceeding that was going on, we took a hard, look at it and took a difficult stance, and we indeed supported that person's case,
Right.
Willie Sanders, right?
Mhm.
And we were always kind of ready to put ourselves in situations that if we were taking the easy way out, we would not have done that. So except for not being being so insecure, but at least they made a TV series about me called Insecure. I was so happy when I read, although she wasn't insecure like I was insecure. I mean, there are different kinds of insecurity, but I used to talk when I sort of had a chance to finally watch it, which was only a couple of years ago. I said, "Oh yeah, here's a series right about me. It's called Insecure,
Yeah, right. Oh, stop. Well,
and
now,
about Black people and
right,
Black women."
exactly.
Yeah.
In LA, though. So hold on. There's something else, real quick. As you know, recently, two women who are writers won the Pulitzer Prize to talk about Black women missing in Chicago and Black women's missing bodies. And I forget their names. I'm really sorry. I should have brought it with me. It just evoked for me, Barbara, when we were dealing with the murders of Black women in Boston, and we made it a centerpiece of the work, the organizing work we were doing at the time. I remember so distinctly that, the whole issue of class, culture, clashing, the Black community saying, why should we care about these streetwalkers, prostitutes, drug addicts? Who knows what they're about? And we were like, that's not the point. And so I remember distinctly a meeting that we held in Jamaica Plain, and there were several hundred people who were there. We're talking, really trying to talk about how to approach the city. What do you do when you've got 20 Black women missing and no one knows where they are, where their bodies are, and they're just left? And I'll never forget this African American man, whose name should not be mentioned, stood up and began to lecture us about what we should be doing and what ought to be happening. And I said, you know what? You need to organize Black men. You need to deal with the misogyny of Black men, because I know, I'm from the south side of Chicago, I know some of your friends know what's going on. And the fact of the matter is, we even had to deal with this pushback from Black men who still, in the midst of the obvious murders and deaths of Black women, the first thought is, let me tell you what you should be doing, as opposed to owning and understanding Black male violence, period, etc. Well, we never were friends, he and I, but he did say to me many years later, you put something on my mind, because I hadn't been thinking about that in that way. I'm like, great, excellent. So it was a very tense moment, because the meeting was Black and white people together, and then you've got two Black people, in a contretemps, But for me, I feel like that's the constancy about Black feminist politics, is taking those politics in any venue I find myself and making sure I'm looking through that lens about how's it affecting us? What's the intention about how this is going to affect us? So that's all I have to say about that.
Listen, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I kind of asked this question earlier, but someone else put it in the comments, and I think it's a better summation of what I was trying to ask. How do we stay, or how do y'all stay radical? How do we stay radical?
That's kind of funny. Well, I mean, either you are or you're not. I don't know how to say it any other way, but it's kind of like, once you really have an analysis and you see what's going on in this world, and you see all the poetry, FAUX, and all the inability to maintain and stay in the cut, it is not easy. It's not an easy thing. And also, the thing about being a radical thinker is that your thinking is evolving and changing, deepening. There are certain realities about the way capitalism functions and about the way white supremacy functions. And then at that intersection of where you're analyzing it as a Black feminist and seeing how the different patterns work together. I never could imagine not being a radical thinker. I can't imagine that. I cannot, just like I can't imagine being bored. I have an issue with that. Barbara and I were talking about this. When people say that they're bored, I'm like, why? What's wrong with your brain? What are you talking about? Aren't you going 55 miles an hour? You also have to see, there were some young Black women who came to a conference at BU. After the session I led was done, they came up to me, and one of them said, my mom, she's telling me about the fact that I shouldn't be a Black feminist, because if I'm a Black feminist, I'm not going to get a man. And, I side-eyed her and just said, tell me more. She said, well, you're going to be difficult to work with, and you're going to be like demanding, this, that, and the other. Exactly. Same thing you would imagine, I would imagine the same sorts of things you would want in any healthy, non-toxic relationship, irrespective of gender, how you're involved. And she said, but, with men, you have to do all this back. I said, no, you don't. And if this is something that young people are really concerned about, then I did say to her in the end, you need to make your own judgments about how you want to live your life. You will be in conflict as a young Black woman, as a young Black feminist, because in many, many ways, although things have evolved, things are not linear. There are still ways in which African American women and women in the African diaspora are denigrated, are sexualized, are discreated, I've been calling it lately. So there's a lot of work still to be done in terms of evolving and thinking. So I'm committed for life. That's just what I can say. Never going to change, ever. Barbara?
As you should know.
I think what it means to be a radical is that you don't change. You don't change once the scales fall away from your eyes, and you see what this is and why it functions the way that it does
Right.
to harm the maximum number of people and to exploit the maximum number of people and to absolutely destroy the earth in the process. Once you see that, you can't unsee it.
Correct.
So what would have to have happened in the intervening years to make me think, oh yeah, everything's fine, everything's okay? No, it's not. It's not.
Not at all.
And we're in a year when, the not okayness of it all is just paramount. But we continue to struggle. That's the thing about struggle versus so-called success and
Mhm.
accomplishment. The success is in the struggle.
Correct.
Having been involved, in pro-Palestinian organizing intensively, not the first time, didn't start on October 7th for me,
Right.
but very much an intensive period since October 7th. We get discouraged. And by we, I mean groups that I'm a part of. I'm a member of Jewish Voice for Peace
Mhm.
in Albany. And we get discouraged, but yet we keep at it. We keep thinking of ways to be accountable. And I mean, when some of us are like just done, too tired to even, do another thing, others of us have suddenly gotten refreshed because of time they took away or what they did to kind of get reinvigorated. And we just, the struggle continues. So as I said, once you see what it's all about, I don't see why you would go back and say, oh no, capitalism is fine. I don't have any
Mhm.
problems with capitalism, white supremacy, that's really doing it for me too. Yeah. Yeah, what
Right.
about the misogyny? Oh no, yeah, no. Mm-mm.
I'd like a
Once
cup
you
of
figure
that.
it out,
Right.
once you figure it out, you stay true. And the thing is, both Demita and I, my sister Beverly, and others, people from our generation, we paid prices. We have paid a price,
Exactly.
but
Mhm.
that's not what we're talking about today.
No.
And the
And
prices that we paid are not necessarily disincentives to continuing the political struggle.
that's exactly correct.
Anybody who's doing anything that's worth their time or worth their time to be involved in, you're going to pay something
And one
because you're
more
going
thing.
against the grain. Yeah, you're
Exactly.
going against the grain. And we
Our
only have
pro-
a few minutes for one question, right? We're gonna have one question.
No, I was just
Yeah.
gonna say.
I'm actually thinking about not having any questions because y'all want to do a question, please, Demita, Miss Barbara?
I was just going to say, well, think about something else. The thing that feeds us as radicals is also the continuing relational possibilities across all borders for people to come together. We're talking about Palestine right now, which is so key. We need to talk about Sudan. We need to talk about the Democratic Republic of Congo. These struggles that are happening across all kinds of so-called man-made boundaries link us and strengthen us without us really seeing the result in hand. But when you think about what's been happening in Sudan, when you think about what's happening in the West Bank, the ways in which the forces of oppression are interacting with people are exactly the same. They are death dealing. They are not about the preservation of community, the preservation of the earth. And while it doesn't seem like you can really leverage those connections, they can feed the soul. Sorry, there's a dog out there. They feed the soul. So that's also what keeps me going is that continual process of seeing how over time and space connections are being made. The woman, I mean, just even tonight, really thinking about Brazil and thinking about, not just, I was thinking about all the people I've known who are Brazilian, the music, the food, the blackness of Brazil. That's a wonderful thing for us to be more in touch with because it can get very isolated living in white America. We're still just 14% of the population. And we can't ever forget that. We're not like Brazil, where they're like 60% or something. So anyway, I wanted to just say that about making connections.
I am appreciative of both of you all for saying about, answering the question about how to maintain your radicality, because as a younger Black feminist, I think, like y'all said before, we've made Black feminism a little bit trendy. Like it's about very much so getting the followers and the book deals and all these other things. And you mentioned that there were sacrifices. And I want to thank you both because I don't know everything. I know a little bit, but I know it wasn't cool to be a Black feminist when you were organizing Combahee. And
No, it
you
was not.
actually paved
Yeah.
the way for us to even, someone like myself, to declare for myself to be a Black feminist. And so I want to thank you for that. And also for always making these connections beyond the US, recognizing we're in the belly of the beast, recognizing that we have to continue to do the work. It's not trendy, it's not popular, but it's to continue in the struggle. And so I really do appreciate that, and your wisdom, and for your laughter, because, and then I need to learn how to just let everything go, because I'm sensitive as well. So I appreciate it so much. But
Yes.
we only have a few more moments, 4 minutes.
Okay.
And we cannot give like there's like over 30 questions in the Q&A. So we can't get to all the questions, but somebody asked, what advice would you give to Black feminists, particularly younger Black feminists? What offerings would you give to them?
Mm.
And then just, yeah.
Oh man. Find the things that are in the culture right now that don't reflect the fullness of who we are, and then focus on that, because there's a delimiting that's going on about who Black women are, what young Black women are about. I'm curious to know how people are reacting to the dominant cultural paradigm right now. If I was a young Black woman, I'd have a whole lot to say about things that I shouldn't get into on this phone, on this Zoom, because I feel like, again, it's really troubling to me that the kind of violence against young Black women, the kinds of issues that young Black women are dealing with as they struggle to figure out how to be in the fullness of who they are as a human being, and not have to bend or have to turn themselves inside out to be someone that they're not. I think another thing too is to think about what it means to be in community, because that's another thing about one of the challenges, I think, that that there exists for you people who are young. Barbara, I used to say this, we used to be in an attic room in an old building with one another for hours on end, chopping it up, eating together, hanging out together, just doing all the things that create a basis for relating as well as intellectual exchange. And for so many people now, the connection's not really pheromonic, as I call it. You're not in each other's houses. You're not with one another easily. Uh-oh. Okay. We can still see you. Are you all right? Is everything okay?
Who, me?
Yes.
I'm fine. I'm fine. No, I
Okay.
just saw a bug somewhere. No, I'm fine.
In any event, I think what's really, for young people now, I think the thing is you have to find that thing you're passionate about. And you need to decide, how are you going to serve? What's your purpose on earth here anyway? What are you doing? Are you here just for your own, satisfaction? For how are you going to use your gifts to better the world? And I'm actually not ashamed to say this. I really do believe in service. I believe that we are here. What's our purpose? Why are we here? It's not just to float on a bubble of, whatever. I feel like if we have, as Barbara said, once you see it, you cannot not see it. And we are in many ways in a dire situation. It gets papered over and covered over in all kinds of ways. But I have a good friend who's in the West Bank right now. When I think of her all the time, I think about when I want to write to her, how are you doing? You can't even ask, how am I doing? You can't ask that question. You know how things are going. Belly of the beast, how's it going? It's not going great. But she will say, or she might say, we picked olives today. We picked grapes today. There are things that people engage in a human way that we all seem to be remembering that's happening in the midst of the ugly. So another way to sustain yourself is to make sure that you see the paradoxical nature of life on earth. No one who has been through struggle is asking someone else not to have any joy. No one. You ask anyone and they're not going to say, yeah, you should suffer just like I did. You'll never hear that. You're always going to be offered the tea. You're going to be offered the piece of cake. You're going to be offered something that's part of the joy of living. And we need to keep remembering that. And also the ability to interact with one another, fundamentally with one another. I love social media. Don't get me wrong. You know I love to play. But it is not a substitute for the kind of relational, actual relational building that really needs to be done in person. So I'm done. I've got to stop.
Oh, that was really beautiful. Thank you so much, Demita. Miss Barbara?
I think Demita said almost all of it. The only thing I would add is that wherever you are, a Black feminist, young or not, you know, a different age ranges or whatever, look at where you are geographically, look at where you live, and figure out what's happening with people who you say that you stand with and for. In other words, what's happening with Black women who may not have the privileges that you have. We talked about educational privilege in the Combahee River Collective statement because we didn't really have class and economic privilege, but we had the opportunity to get really great educations. And we used those educations, we deployed them for, we hope, the betterment of humanity in our community, not just to feather our own nest. But I think it's really important. It's not just about you, it's about what's a collective situation of people who share, with whom you share a world and with whom you share concerns and identity. Are people still getting sterilized against their will? Is the rate of incarceration for women of color in your community skyrocketing? You know, so much different than that for others. What about the maternal mortality and infant mortality rates? All kinds of ways and things. What's happening at those workplaces as far as compensation, unfair compensation, exploitation, sexual harassment? What's happening with actual real life people that maybe Black feminism could be a path for? It's not about proselytizing. I don't know that. I mean, I don't know that we wanted to convince people. Maybe we did at a certain point, but I'm not about like making more Black feminists. I'm about being a Black feminist in the world doing her work. That's what I'm interested in.
There you go.
And before I say so long, or we say so long to each other, I want to thank the ASL interpreters for all they have given to this particular meeting and this particular event. You've been wonderful, and I truly appreciate that you put our words into a much broader and inclusive context. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mani and Gloshanda, our amazing ASL interpreters. We appreciate you so much. I want to also thank Evelyn and Anastácia for being on the call with us as well. I want to thank all the audience for being here from all over. Miss Barbara and Demita, someone said they were crying from the encounter together. And I want to thank and I want to thank you, Demita, Miss Barbara.
It's okay to cry. It's okay.
For everything, for your wisdom, your leadership. It's an honor to know you all, to learn from you. And I'm just grateful that we are here. You are here to celebrate 50 years of Combahee. And thank you for saying yes. So y'all, this conversation will be uploaded to YouTube so that you can watch. Please don't harass me anymore about will it be recorded, because it will. And so I just appreciate everyone from being here from all over, which just shows how much the Combahee River Collective has impacted all of our lives. So thank you both, Miss Barbara and Demita. Appreciate you so much.
Okay.
Ciao, everybody. Beijo.
Ciao.
Thank you again.
Bye.